Hi, and welcome to Rose Red Homestead. Water, water, water. Nothing is more important to the human body than water. Our bodies are made up of between 60 and 75% of water. And unless we replenish that every single day, life can get very difficult. In fact, we can live 3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without water. For years, federal agencies, local agencies, and churches have been suggesting and counseling us to store a supply of water for emergencies. And that is critically important, and never more so important than in today's world. Climate change is affecting our weather patterns. We have seen over the last couple of years some very dire emergencies. And the television images have just been powerful. We've seen long lines of people standing in front of firehouses or other places waiting to get bottles of water, single bottles of water. And how long would a single bottle of water last them? Some of the most heart-wrenching images for me came out of Puerto Rico with the recent hurricane there, when there were just hundreds of people standing in line, holding any kind of a container that they could scrounge, waiting to fill those containers up from a pipe that was protruding from the dirt. I think it was beside a highway, and it was flowing with yellowish, brownish water. And oh my goodness, I just hope that when those people got back to their homes with that water, that they had something that they could use to filter and sanitize it. But that's what we're going to talk about today, is a first in our series of videos on water for emergencies. This video will focus on how much do we need to store and how do we go about storing it. And that's what we will get right into in just a moment. Well, how much water should we store? FEMA has given us a guideline, and others have also chimed in, and nobody agrees. And so the range is, from FEMA, we should store 1 gallon of water per person per day, and that will give us enough for cooking and enough for basic hygiene. And then they also suggest that we should have 3 days of water stored. Other sources suggest that we should store 2 gallons of water per person per day for a minimum of 14 days. And Jim and I are more inclined to follow that guideline simply because it is more water for a longer time. Now, if you look at the data for how long it has taken in some instance right here in the United States for residential water to be restored, to come out of our taps clean again, in some areas that have been devastated by these natural disasters, it has been up to 90 days. And so determining how much water we need to store can really be an individual family decision. Jim and I have decided that what we're going to do is store 2 gallons of water per person for a minimum of 14 days, and that's our basic supply. And then once our basic supply is in place, then we're going to build on that, which we have done. So that would be, just for the 14-day supply for Jim and me, that would be 56 gallons of water. Where do we store 56 gallons of water? Well, I'm sure that many of you have seen those great big blue barrels. Those store 50 gallons of water. So it would take one of those big barrels for Jim and me plus some extra. So that is where we have started with ours, 50 gallons of water barrels, and that's what our basic supply is. If we are ever faced with any kind of a natural disaster or any kind of civil unrest, we're probably going to have 2 choices. And those choices would be to either shelter in place right in our homes, in which case those 50-gallon barrels of water would be just fine, or the second choice would be to bug out. Now, if we have to bug out, what do we need to take in terms of water? Since water weighs 8 pounds, a little more than 8 pounds per gallon, those 50-gallon barrels of water that we have in our garage weigh over 400 pounds. Just picture Jim and me trying to struggle with one of those barrels getting it into our truck. It simply would not happen. And so that's why it is really important for all of us to have a redundancy plan when it comes to storing water. And what I mean by that is we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. We don't store all of our water in one size of a container. We have to be able to have water in various sizes of containers. So if we have to bug out in our vehicles, we can have one size that we can get out there to our vehicles. Or if we have to bug out on foot, then we also have appropriate sizes that we could stick in our backpacks or our 72-hour kits or whatever. So therefore, Jim and I have stored quite a bit of water in 5-gallon barrels. Now, when you think about your redundancy plan, it is also important to think about your family. For instance, Jim and I, well, we are not as chipper as we once were. And so thinking about carrying anything heavier than about a 5-gallon barrel of water, which weighs about 40 pounds, is pretty much out of the question for us. But given enough time, we could probably take every single one of our 5-gallon barrels of water out to our truck in order to bug out. We would not try to carry these on foot. We have a smaller size for that. So, how do we fill these? Well, you have to know your water source that comes through your kitchen tap or whatever tap. If it is from a city source, it has already been treated and is safe to drink. And therefore, we don't need to do anything else. So we simply unscrew the lids here and fill this up with tap water. And the same with the big blue barrels. Now, we fill our big blue barrels with a hose, of course, because wherever you fill them, that is where they're going to stay. So we make sure that our hose is connected to a house tap on the outside of the house. We want house water or city water going into those barrels. So supposing that you bring clean barrels into your home, whether it's the 50-gallon size or smaller, and those blue barrels come in 30-gallon and 20-gallon sizes. You can also buy 10 gallons of these, 7-gallon barrels. 5 gallons is the one that we have chosen to use. So when you bring a brand new one into your home, what we do, I don't put detergent. I clean these out, but I don't put detergent in these barrels. Detergent is so hard to get out of anything. You just have to rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse, which ultimately becomes a waste of water. These are pretty clean when they come to us. I just put a little bit of water in these barrels and then put enough Clorox. It has to be brand new Clorox that I know is still active. And then enough in order to disinfect. And then I just take the barrels and swish it around, get it all wet on the inside. And then I make sure the lid is on tight because I don't want the water to evaporate off the sides, off the insides. And I let that sit for a little while. And the same thing with the 50-gallon barrels. We just roll them around the yard a little bit to make sure that that disinfecting Clorox water covers every surface on the inside. Then I let them sit for a little while, and then we dump that water out. And because it's Clorox water, I don't bother to rinse it again because the Clorox will help disinfect. And then I just fill these up with water. If you don't have city water, if your water comes from a well, then I'm sure that you have had your water tested and you know the quality of your water. And so you would need to make the decision whether you would need to disinfect it before storing it. But with city water, don't add anything else to it. Just store it just the way it is. How often do we have to rotate our water? How often do we have to empty these barrels out and refill them with water? Again, the literature is mixed on that. FEMA says between 6 months to a year. Other sources say, my goodness, water doesn't ever go bad. If it is stored in a clean and disinfected container, it's not going to go bad. The only reason that it would go bad is if there is some contaminant left on the inside that would impact the water. You really don't need to rotate it all. Another source I read said you're good for about 5 years. So again, do your own research and figure out from your own perspective how safe you want to be. And one of the things that happens if you get ready to use water that has been stored for quite a while, you're going to notice it tastes a little bit off, a little bit flat. And that's because the oxygen is all out of it. When we turn on the tap water, you can just look at this stream of water and know that it's full of air bubbles, it's full of oxygen. And that's part of the taste that we have developed with our water. And so to reoxygenate water, it's a very simple thing. You just get 2 containers and you just pour the water back and forth between the 2 containers, slosh it around, get that air back into it, that oxygen back into it, and then it will improve the taste greatly. Now, if something else is the matter with your water, if when you draw it out of your barrels, it is cloudy, or if you see any kind of growth in there, or if it has an off smell, then you're going to need to do an additional step. And we'll cover that in our next video, which is called Water 2. And there, in that video, we will go through filtering and disinfecting water sources. 3 quick other things that we do in terms of our redundancy water plan. First of all, Jim drinks an awful lot of soda. It's diet soda because he's such a character. As I have mentioned in other videos, we're on a healthy lifestyle plan. We are revising what we eat and what we take into our bodies so that we can stay as healthy as possible. We want to live a long time for each other and for our grandchildren. So Jim's idea of healthy lifestyle is to not drink the sugary sodas, but rather diet sodas. So he empties a lot of these bottles, both this size and in the 2-liter size. We reuse these soda bottles for storing water. But let me tell you how we do it. First of all, when he finishes a bottle of soda, he will bring it over to the sink and rinse it out, get all the diet. Get all the diet soda out, including washing the lid, the inside of the lid too, because that's where contaminants can hide. And then he puts like 1 drop of dishwashing soap in here, and we have a series of brushes. We bought a set of, I think, about 7 different types of bottle brushes, and there's one that we can use for this. So he brushes it and cleans it all out and then rinses and rinses to be sure all the soap is out. Then we quickly disinfect these with Clorox water, including the inside of the lid. And then he fills it with water, and we store these in our freezer. This is ice. And this serves 2 purposes for us. And that is, first of all, these don't have priority in our freezer. It's only when we have extra space. Food, of course, has priority in our freezer, but we seem to always have quite a bit of space in our freezer where he can store quite a few of these. So if we had to bug out, for instance, we would just take our ice chest, put it right below the freezer, load a bunch of these bottles in the ice chest, plus whatever food we were going to take with us that needed to stay cool. And then if we were gone for several days, this ice inside here would ultimately melt, and we would just have more drinking water. So that's why we do this. But now let's talk for just a moment about what are the best kinds of plastic containers to reuse to store water in. So in our country, all plastic containers now have to have a recycling symbol on it. And that recycling symbol looks like this. It's 3 arrows making a triangle, and then there is a number inside. And very often there are letters down at the bottom. And the letters are an abbreviation of the chemical makeup of whatever the container is. And so this gives you a cue about which ones. There are 7 numbers 1 through 7 on these recycling symbols. And while they have been designed for recycling, they also give us a lot of information that helps us decide whether or not to use that type of plastic. Now, this bottle is a number 1 PET, or sometimes it's PETE. So this is a PET plastic, and all PET plastics are designed to be used for one time. They are one use, and then they're supposed to be recycled. However, this plastic is quite heavy duty. All of the water bottles, the disposable water bottles that you can buy in the case, those are all number 1s. Juices are stored in number 1s. The big danger, according to everything that I have read, with number 1s is not necessarily that the plastic is going to put bad chemicals in the water unless you leave it out in direct sunlight or in the heat. So all number 1s, we need to be sure, are stored out of heat. And that's not why we store it in the freezer. We store it for the other reasons that I just mentioned. But the big danger in these is from contamination. And so because this is such heavy plastic and it works well for reuse, if you do a good job of sanitizing the inside, they're okay for storing water. Now, in terms of what other plastics to use, in the numbers 1 through 7, not every one of them is good for storing water. The best ones to reuse to store water are number 2, number 4, and number 5. Never use number 3 or number 6. Those will impart dangerous chemicals from the plastic into your water. So stick with 2, 4, and 5. And if you use number 1s, just be sure that you have sanitized it very carefully. Things like pickles can also come in number 1s. And with pickles, you can wash from now until the cows come home, and you will never get that pickle taste out of the plastic, and it will impart that pickle taste to your water. And unless you like pickle water, then I would stay away from pickle containers. So we also need to use good judgment about these containers. Now with soda is so easy just to rinse and clean out of a jar. Peanut butter, not so much. Pickles, not so much. So just use your good judgment in terms of what you reuse. Now here's another thing. The blue plastic is number 2 plastic, and so it is certainly safe to store water in. But milk jugs are also number 2 plastic, and they're not good for storing. Not because of the plastic. The plastic won't impart bad chemicals, but the plastic is brittle and it will deteriorate very fast. And so if you think that you are storing a supply of water in milk jugs that you have cleaned out, you may go out to your supply when you desperately need it and just find puddles, because the plastic shatters and decomposes. And so not for long-term storage, milk jugs are not very good. So this is one quick thing that we do to help with our redundancy. The second quick thing that we do is I can an awful lot of food. And therefore, if you're a canner as well, you know that at any given time we have empty jars on our shelves waiting for our next batch. Well, why not use those empty jars for water storage? And so when we empty a jar of food, this is a 1 quart size, this is a 2 quart size, I wash these out with soap and water, then put them in the dishwasher to run through a complete cycle, and then they're sanitized. So I take them out of the dishwasher and I fill them up with just tap water from the kitchen sink, and then I put on a lid, and it's not a new lid, it is a reused lid that I have washed, and then a band. And sometimes I have a number of these plastic lids that also work really well for water. And then I just take them right back out on our canning shelves and put them where I would have put an empty jar anyway. So this is a quick and easy way for those of us that do canning. Then the third and last quick tip is, if all else fails, watch for sales and buy cases of bottled water. This bottled water, this symbol right here, is a number 1 PET, and so these are in number 1s. But if you don't open them, if you leave them sealed and in the cases, these will keep years, and just shove cases of water under the beds in your home. Now, we live in the desert, high desert. We're at 5,000 feet on the Colorado Plateau. When we drive into our jobs at the university, it's an 80-mile round trip. We drop down off the Colorado Plateau and down onto the valley floor, and we are now out of the Colorado Plateau, and we're in the Basin and Range province. It is very hot, and it's well over 100 degrees almost every day in the summertime. And so we never travel any time of year without a case of water in the backseat of our vehicles. In both of our vehicles, we carry a case of water. You know, sometimes we prepare for big emergencies, like what would we do for water if a hurricane hit, or if a flood came, or if a fire came. So we're thinking in terms of these big emergencies. However, emergencies can occur at any time. They can occur on the freeway. Have you ever been stuck on the freeway for several hours? We certainly have. A number of years ago, I took my daughter and my little grandson, who was then about 5 years old, and we went on a dirt road up on one of these plateaus nearby, and it was summertime, it was very hot, and we were going to go hiking. And we got out of the truck, and oh my gosh, there were all hundreds, thousands of these little no-see-ums that in just clouds, massive clouds. And those are those nasty little biting insects. And so, boy, we got right back in the truck and wanted to get out of there, and my truck would not start. And we had not brought enough water. And it was a little bit panicky. My goodness, we had this young child with us, and we were quite remote. And fortunately, I was able to get out of the truck and run away from the bugs and find a place up on a hill where I could call my son-in-law, who came to rescue us. But we don't always have the option of someone coming to rescue us. And so it is good to think about water emergencies and to be prepared. And I'm especially mindful of that when I have my sweet grandchildren in my truck and we're out in the wild doing some kind of an adventure. I always carry water. So let's think about what we need to do within our own families and homes to store water, and how much we think we need to store, so that we have available to us water to drink whenever we need to drink water. Thank you for joining us, and this is the first of, I think we'll do 3 videos on emergency water. So we hope to see you next time. If you would like to know when our videos will be published, just subscribe to our channel and you'll receive a notification when the other videos come out. We'll see you next time.